when someone is saying that, like, oh, being trans is not real, like, how do you address that without actually going into like multiple layers of misinformation and debunking that one by one? What is transphobia? I thought phobias were like when you're afraid of things. But how can people be afraid of something trans that isn't even real, LMAO? And it's like, okay, so transphobia, you know, phobia doesn't only mean irrational fear of, it also means aversion, which is a strong dislike for something. Believing that trans people aren't real is transphobic, actually. You know, even if you are not scared of trans people per se, or you have a strong dislike for trans people per se, because you don't believe that being trans exists, is rooted in transphobia, and it is denying our existence. So actually, that is transphobic. Denying the existence of trans people is transphobic, because the reason why people deny the existence of trans people is because, oh, nobody has ever actually changed sex. Oh, you can't change sex, so no trans woman has ever become female. No male has ever become female. That is transphobia. That's transphobia. It's just transphobia. That is like the term for it. And in order for like people to explain how this is wrong, how like gender is different from sex, and also like if you do medically transition, you are going to have changes that align more with the, you know, with the sex that you're transitioning to than you have when it comes to what you're transitioning away from, right? I have been on HRT for quite some time. My hormonal level is female. I have the estrogen levels of an average white female, and I also have I have testosterone that is lower than the average white female because I do not produce testosterone. I don't have testosterone. I actually need to talk about microdosing. When it comes to the genotype, like it doesn't matter at this point anymore because it's kind of like a collection of blueprints that are already like put in place. So it doesn't matter if I have X, Y, X, 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 Y, or whatever. Like it literally doesn't matter because everything is done. Like, you know, my hormonal levels are being controlled by my estrogen injections. So it doesn't matter because, you know, all the effects are basically being overwritten. I had bottom surgery, so I do not have the phenotype that is stereotypically associated with that of males. And just because I don't have a womb doesn't make me less of a woman, right? It also doesn't make me less female in that sense, right? Your gametes and so on, it's not actually sufficient in order to tell whether or not someone is male or female. That is why there are a lot of different factors that come into place in order to determine whether or not something is male or female. It is really reductive to just be like, oh, you have these gametes, so that means you have these phenotypes, that means you have this genotype, that means you have, you know, it just doesn't work. And, you know, in order to assign someone a sex, you just look at the phenotype. You don't check their gametes, you don't check their reproductive organs, you don't check their chromosomes and whatnot. Like, you don't do that. You just assume based on the phenotype that you can observe. It is just an observation. And this observation can be wrong, especially when you consider what gender actually means, what gender expression means, what your gender identity means. There are a lot of things that come into play when it comes to, you know, human beings. And just believing that trans people aren't real because a male has never successfully started producing the large gametes is a wild and gross oversimplification of what it means to be trans, what it means to be a human being, and so on. It's really disgusting. Oh, how many males have given birth? Like, oh, depending on what characteristic you're using in order to determine whether or not someone is male or female. Like, you know, a lot of people love the XY equals male thing. That means someone who has given birth with XY chromosomes is actually a male giving birth. We have had cases like this that exist. Intersex people exist. So obviously everything is just like falling apart on this logic. Everything is falling apart when you actually have advanced understanding of biology and you like read a little bit more about processes going on. Your gender identity doesn't match. Your gender identity doesn't have to match your phenotype, right? Your phenotype doesn't determine your gender identity. That is something that pisses me really off about like how right-wingers reacted when I posted the video debunking John Money, right? When I was saying that like his cruel experiment was wrong and it failed and was disgusting and abusive and so on. But actually, here's something that we can learn from it because like he had the wrong thesis, right? He basically he thought that he can through social conditioning turn a boy into a girl, right? That just doesn't work. And I was just like explaining how these things can be applied to trans people and the trans debate. But people obviously do not want to listen to the points that I make. They just see that I am explaining something about John Money and they're jumping to the first thing that they can think of in order to discredit whatever I'm talking about in the video. And that always pisses me off with right-wingers. It's because you're coming in with good faith and you're like explaining these things and people are being disingenuous and misconstruing things in order to not listen to what you're saying and also put off other people who might be able to actually comprehend the words that you're saying, right? It's so frustrating. It's so annoying. And I just wish that people had the ability to see through this disingenuous bullshit. But it's like really powerful to be like, oh, this person is a pedophile, this person is a groomer, and you should not listen to whatever this pedo has to say. Which is something that they love to do when it comes to me. Like, it doesn't matter for, like, their proof is literally just, oh, Nyara acknowledges the existence of trans kids. Oh, trans kids don't exist because being trans is like a mental illness and it's just gaslighting and conditioning and grooming. It's weird, it's disgusting. And people have like these thoughts implanted into their minds. And this is going to create like a world where people explain certain things and they use, you know, words in order to describe their experiences and share like the education, and then they hear something like, oh, I was trans as a kid, you know, I knew I was trans when I was younger, and then it's like, oh no, you were groomed into this, oh, you're going to grow out of this phase, oh, you know, so on, in order to just like listen to what we have to say when we describe our experience, our day-to-day life. You know, this also is rooted in the idea of like, oh, you're saying that you were trans as a kid, and they believe that being trans is only, you know, when you go from male to female, which is like medical intervention and so on. So they think about genital mutilation, they think about hormones, they think about medication and so on. And it's not like, oh, you knew that you were trans because you didn't align with your phenotype, you didn't resonate with how society perceived you, you didn't feel comfortable with the box that society put you in, and it caused you discomfort and made you feel out of place. You didn't understand these things, you couldn't talk about these things, you didn't have any representation, and you were just like alone with these struggles, dealing with it. Nobody convinced you of anything. Quite the opposite. Society constantly told you that because you're born male, you have to be a boy and you have to man up and so on, which caused you even more distress. Like, instead of listening to these things, they hear like, oh, I knew that back then, back in the days, when I was a child, I knew that I was trans, or like, I didn't know that I was trans. I was trans, but I didn't have like the word to describe it. They think of like, oh, you were groomed into that. Oh, your parents forced you into that. Oh, you know, shit like that. It's really difficult to have these conversations and have people come into it with an open mind when they have like so many bigotries, so much transphobia being implanted into their minds, right? It's just like a web of lies that is inside of your brain, and you kind of need to like detangle everything and address all of these things. And this is why like making this website is so incredibly complicated for me, because like when someone is saying that like, oh, being trans is not real, like how do you address that without actually going into like multiple layers of misinformation and debunking that one by one? Oh my god, I can use layers, so I can just like hide this layer and then I'm writing on a new layer. Isn't that crazy? Chat, isn't that crazy? Proof by contradiction: cis people can't be trans by grooming, and trans people can't be made cis by conversion camps. Yeah, exactly. Like if I have something like trans people don't exist, right? This is based in things like being trans is a trend, right? You have this one. You have no male has changed to female, right? If this is your big one, this is rooted in this one, and it is rooted in this one, and then you address this one. No male has changed sex. So you go to things like sex doesn't equal, or sex equals gender, because we're talking about right-wing talking points, right? So no male has changed to female, and then you have things like no man has given birth or shit like that, right? And a lot of it is like connected, right? A lot of these things, a lot of these talking points are connected, but it just like it keeps spreading out, and it's really difficult to just address this without addressing this, without explaining this, and so on, right? You just go lower and lower, and you need to like find a fundamental baseline understanding, and it's kind of like relearning everything. And if someone is unwilling to learn because they already have like these beliefs ingrained into them, it's going to be like incredibly difficult to reach them. It just sucks, right? It just sucks because like all of these things are rooted in misinformation, ignorance, and so on, right? It's really frustrating. So I'm kind of like overwhelmed in order to actually debunk all of these things. If I want to have an info point talking about these things, everything is going to be like really convoluted. So yeah, that's just how it goes. How's the website work going? I'm trying to like figure things out right now. I'm a little bit overwhelmed with like how to handle these things. And I'm trying to like explain why it is so complicated. Everybody